and all of you being here and people that are watching on Zoom. We appreciate your time, and we'll appreciate your time going forward in creating what we're about to create over the next 6 months. So thank you for being here. We have a wonderful presentation and some new technology, right? Buzz their seats or something interesting like that. But we have some incredible things to tell you about. I look forward to the presentation, and feel free, once North Star is not in the region right after this, they're going back to start working on the rest of the project. While they're away, if you need to connect with us at the chamber, Jamie will introduce Julie in a second, but myself or Julie are available at all times to answer questions or connect you with the right people. With that being said, this wouldn't have happened without this next gentleman. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about it, but his passion, his expertise, and his direction is what got us to the starting point, and that's where we are, at the starting point of a long journey. And it's going to be a great journey. But thanks to him. I want to introduce Jamie Tobridge, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Luca, and thanks everyone for coming. I especially want to welcome our guests who are watching virtually. And so I'll just start with just a little bit of housekeeping for those folks. We definitely want you to participate fully in what we're doing today. And so the way you can do that is in the Q&A within Zoom. If you put your name in the Q&A, then Misty, who is our awesome tech support for this whole event, will alert us that and make you live so you can speak. So if you have a question or comment or at different points here, North Star is going to be making this a little more interactive. That's the way you can participate if you're following virtually. So thanks to everyone who came out in person, and thanks to everyone for logging in. As Luca said, I'm Jamie Trowbridge. I'm the CEO of Making Publishing, and I'm on the board of the Chamber. And I'm very pleased, as Luca said, that we're at the beginning of this project, and I see a lot of familiar faces here, so I'm not going to go all the way back to the beginning. But for those of you who are newer to this, the idea here is to brand and market the region, and for the Chamber to play a leading role in that project. The folks that we've hired to begin this work are North Star Place Branding and Marketing, and I'll introduce Will and Nita and Roberto in a moment. They're going to take over from here, and the purpose of our meeting today is for them to fill you in a little on their process, but also it's a working meeting that will involve your input. So I think it's going to be exciting to see where they take us. I'm not quite sure where that is myself. It'll be very interesting to see. Just to sort of go back a little bit before we go forward, why are we doing this? What is the point of this exercise? And for many of some of you in the room have been on the task force with me over the last few years to try to identify how we could really help with economic development in the region. And the conclusion that many of us came to was that if all we did was let market forces shape what was going to happen to the Monadnock region, the picture would not be pretty. We are facing what Phil Suter, the former CEO of the Chamber, called demographic headwinds. The region is the Cheshire County is one of the few counties in the state that lost population over the last 10 years. It aged considerably over the last 10 years, and many of you are very deeply involved in the business community, and I don't need to tell you how dramatic the shortage of workers is in our community right now. So it's not that bad things are happening right now or that there's anything wrong with the Monadnock region as it is, but we have to be forward-looking, and that's what this plan's about. Branding the region and marketing the region is a way to let people know what we have here. We all know that it's a special place. And when we bring guests here, they say, wow, I never knew this was here. This is so amazing. So branding and marketing is going to allow us to tell the region's story. Don't have to go very far outside of the Monadnock region for people to have very little awareness or perception of it. So our intent here is to bring workers here, visitors, new residents, and also higher ed students. And speaking of higher ed, I do want to thank Veronica and Keene State College for making this space available to us today. Thank you so much for that. And it's not going to be an instantaneous process. We're not going to get a brand and magically achieve these goals. It's going to be a process that takes a while, and it's going to be a process that takes commitment and perseverance. And the commitment piece will come, I think, from the chamber. The chamber is very committed to this project. The board is really on board with having this be an ongoing initiative, but in terms of funding for marketing, we're going to be looking to volunteers from the community, contributions from the community. And we think it's really in all our interest. And so we'll be asking broadly for financial contributions to keep this program going. We're very fortunate to have a grant from the U.S. Economic Development Administration to help us get this started. And we also got a lot of generous contributions or a match required for that grant. So we'll continue to look for grant funding and all sources of funding. But I just want to set expectations at the outset that creating the brand is just the beginning, and this is going to be, as Luca said, a long journey. So with that, I'm very pleased to introduce Will Ketchum, the president of North Star, and I'll let him introduce Roberto and Anita, and take it away.
Good morning. Thank you all for coming out this morning. The sun is shining, and it's been a long week, so you're great to share time with us. It means a lot. I'm Will Ketchum, as Jamie said. My colleagues Anita Carter, our Vice President of Creative Services, and Roberto Munoz, our Research Director. And before they take over and do the fun part with you, the workshop, I just want to give a little background on this process and the why and the what and what good is it, what value is it. I think Jamie pointed out to you why this is a critical initiative. The region is an amazing place. We've had the best 4 days, 3 or 4 days. We've got today and tomorrow as well, and we're blown away. Monadnock Region is a special region, and there, as I said last night, there is no problem with the product or the experience here. It's just a matter that folks don't know much about it, and so we need to help move the needle in the right direction in that regard. So I want to start with a question. Who has ever decided on a vacation destination based on that place's logo? Can I get a show of hands? Nobody. All right. Who might have made a move to another region or city based on the brand or logo of the city? Anyone? Did anyone move their family because they thought a city had a great logo? All right. That's what I thought. However, places have to build reputations, right? They have to stand for something. They have to create an expectation of something. So that might be the only deficit right now in the region is the world doesn't have an expectation of how to make a decision about visiting or relocating to or investing in the Monadnock region. So we help communities do that. We help communities stand alone. And interestingly, we say that a lot, but that, of course, is the Native American translation of Monadnock, is stand alone. And that's the ultimate objective here in this exercise of developing the brand story and the authentic, compelling, and distinct story of this region, but also building a roadmap for how we let the right people that we want to come here as perhaps residents or visitors, how we want to reach them and do that efficiently. Because as Jamie said, budgeting will be tight. We work around the country, and there's an advantage to that. Who are these outsiders telling us they know about our region? Who are they to propose that they can help us unlock what we're really about? Actually, it helps that we work around the country. we can bring a fresh perspective, right? Sometimes you're so close to a place, you take for granted some of the very most special things. I'll tell you that we're not going to recreate what's out there, we're just going to bring it to the surface. The other part of the value of working around the country is we can see how other communities are positioning themselves. And make no mistake, communities now in a smaller, more competitive world are competing with one another for residents, investment, visitors, you name it. So we can help make sure that we are distinct and different from anyone else around the country. Ultimately, the game is about helping the Monadnock region reach its preferred future. So the county, the city, the regional leaders and stakeholders, the tourism community, all have a good future in mind. This is just one tool to help you get there. These are some of the places we've worked around the country, from Alaska to Rhode Island and North Dakota to North Carolina. So we've traveled widely. You see some logos here, and those are simply to give you a sense of where we've been. But I want to say again that this exercise is not about a logo. And that brings to the stage one of our fundamental beliefs as branding people, is that branding has a branding problem. I think that most people associate branding with a logo and a slogan, right? If you've got a logo and a slogan, you've got a brand. Not the case. Okay. We say that your brand is what people say about you when you're not around. Right? You think about that. Whether it's good, bad, or neutral, that's your brand. It's what people say about you from afar. So think about what do people say about the Monadnock region from afar? I think what we've heard a lot is that people aren't saying much, and so we need to change that narrative, and we need to fill that void. Okay, so branding is what you do about that. Branding can do some amazing things. It means you never have to justify your prices in some segments. Think about Starbucks. It's a pretty expensive cup of coffee. The brand helps you get there. Even helps you write your name. This is a brand that's so strong, all you have to see is that mark and you know who it is. It can signal who's the best. It can put a public face on a product as mundane as underwear. Or a name that means absolutely nothing, but has absolute clarity in everyone's mind as to what it is, right? So that's a powerful brand. A brand can give you a competitive edge as an innovator and game changer, or a legacy that endures. But as you think about, let's take Disney as an example. You're not thinking about that beautiful blue PMS color or that nice swoopy text that the brand designers really worked hard on based on Walt Disney's signature. You're not really thinking about that, are you? You're thinking about the experience you might have had at Disney World or enjoying one of their movies. So that's the way destinations build reputations as well. Communities, regions, destinations build reputation. It's based on the experience, not the logo. And if you don't believe that destinations over time have built reputations, I want you to answer these questions. Would you rather have a bachelor party in Las Vegas or Salt Lake City? Would you rather take a beach vacation in Maui or the Jersey Shore? And would you rather sample wine in Sonoma or Detroit? And that's not to say you can't get a great glass of wine in Detroit, but you see the point that over time, these are places that have built reputations. Okay. Some of you might have taken a marketing class in college. Anyone remember the 4 Ps of marketing? Product, place, price, promotion. Well, we have our own 4 Ps of regional branding and marketing that we've developed over the years, and it's real simple: passion, 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 passion. And that means that ultimately the success of this, the truth, the story of this brand comes from the passion of people like you and all those that we're going to meet in this community. We need, and it's our job, to build a story that is authentic and true to the extent that we are facilitating and encouraging and empowering community leaders and individuals, residents at large, to be champions of this idea. So we want to bottle up what we see in terms of meeting you, and we've been talking to lots of people this week and more to go, and get to the underlying DNA of what makes this region tick. But then we want to empower you to do the work of building the brand story. So again, it's about living into the brand idea, which is already happening. But we want to see you be more intentional about owning what you stand for in the world. So just some fundamentals about place branding, which has really been a practice of marketing that's developed over the last 20 years or so, particularly in Europe. They're way ahead of the States in terms of place branding. It's interesting, but communities generally become more competitive and see improvement in their overall reputation when all the main sectors of a community are aligned to a common strategy. And that is to say, the driving idea that we stand for. And we're going to look more specifically at an example of that. EuroCities did a study of 40 cities, 40 European cities on the impact of place branding. So this is empirical, okay? Branding is a squishy thing, right? But there is some empirical evidence that place branding can drive increased competitiveness, resulting in a positive impact on investment, jobs, inhabitants, visitors, and events. It creates higher returns on investments in real estate, infrastructure, and events. And that coherent city development, as the physical, social, economic, and cultural aspects combine to deliver on the brand promise or DNA. Importantly, we want the residents of the region to feel pride in it, and so that businesses and institutions experience and sense a new feeling of purpose and direction. And that is to say, living into the brand idea. Yeah, that's what we're about. Let's do more of it. And let's start an awards program that really underscores the brand idea. Let's install public art that shares the idea. So we want to give folks something to form direction around. So a community brand has three properties. First, it attracts. That's one of the primary objectives here. It attracts residents, tourists, talent your employers need, investors, respect, and certainly attention. And that attention is the next phase where we try to push this concept out with a level of marketing activation. As Jamie said, our role now is to figure out the foundation of your story, your narrative, and build the action plan. But also it transfers magnetism to other objects. So your exports, your people, talk about where they're from. People come here and have experiences and take them with them and create word of mouth. That's already happening. We just want to bottle it up a little bit more. And importantly, it has the power to create order out of random activity. So what we've heard is the problem here is a symptom of simply inaction, not of this isn't an incredible place to live or play, right? So we're going to try to offer a system, some order, so that activity is more intentional and not random as you think about marketing the region. I want to talk about our approach. This simplifies it in 5 sort of phases. But at the very center of the process, and this is sort of shaped like an hourglass, isn't it? So at the neck of the hourglass is the DNA and strategy formation. Today, we're up top at stakeholder and community education and engagement. We're just here to listen and learn. And that's what Anita and Roberto want to do with you in just a moment. We're going to go through quite a bit of research. We're going to be doing a community survey of all the folks in the region. We've got some great research from UNH on how the region is perceived from afar. We're going to be talking to people around the state. How do state economic developers view the region? How do they make decisions about investment and deals that might come to the state and they might channel to this region? And then the research we're doing all week with focus groups and more qualitative research. Then we move to that driving essence, and we'll look at an example of that. Then, only then, so it takes 4 steps to get to the creative part of brand and message development, building the narrative of the region. And then importantly, we moved to brand action ideas. So this isn't, here's the brand and your brand standards, good luck. The most critical part is how do we put the brand to work in 3-dimensional ways, in real ways that drive actions and behaviors in the region, and make the brand come alive well beyond websites and business cards and literature. Okay, so that's a look at the approach. I just want to give you a quick drive-through of how this has worked for some other communities. Here's Providence, Rhode Island, an amazing confluence of creativity and intellect in that city. And of course, it's the capital of Rhode Island. So their branding was the creative capital. And the driving DNA was that creative problem solving and creative inspiration was behind everything they did. And you know, the P became an iconic symbol they could use to build reputation. But I'm going to show you an example in a moment of something that has nothing to do with a logo, and that's how that brand went to work because it was endorsed by actions of residents. So in Tempe, Arizona, home of Arizona State, it's really hot, and you know, we said leverage that, and so you can feel a certain hotness, but there's also an amazing lake there, and most of all, some incredible innovation going on. So making waves in the desert became their story. McKinney, Texas was stuck in the shadow of Dallas and needed to stand alone in its own right. So sometimes we see places next to other prominent places that get lost in the shadow. And we've been really pleased to see how McKinney has become a real superstar among what we call edge communities in the country. Here's Gallatin, Tennessee, just a little bit outside of Nashville. Folks there are proud of the fact that they sort of go their own way, and but yet a kindness and a support of one another, and that led to their true grit, amazing grace concept, and they've been really successful with that. In Greene County, Wisconsin, there's a strong Swiss heritage. And so strong that we said you can't ignore that, bring it to the surface, because it also is a big part of their maker culture. So they have craft breweries and, of course, cheese. And it's been very successful for them. There's an art to it in everything they do. And that transfers all the way to economic development, where they have precision manufacturers who live by that ethos as well. So it's not just cheese and beer makers. And then in Columbus, Indiana, a little isolated town, 50, 70 miles southeast of Indianapolis, home of Cummins Engines, and the founder of that company was a believer in the power of architecture. So this little town, almost in the middle of nowhere, has some of the best mid-century modern architecture in the country. And they weren't leveraging it to the full extent. So we started in that community on a sort of visitor level, and then the idea spread, and the city, the chamber, and all the different organizations, the Arts District even came along and got in on this idea of unexpected and unforgettable. You would never expect such incredible architecture in the middle of Indiana, and you'll never forget it. And they've been very successful in site selection, and the city has actually grown. So this is a great story of a flat population that has begun to grow, even in isolation. So in Fargo, they used to try to convince people it's not cold. And we said, that's not a good idea. You ought to own your coldness. And there's also a real quirky style of folks up there. And we just, everywhere we went, we saw quirky, different people doing really neat, creative things and just being themselves. And we said, you gotta own that as well. So their branding, North of Normal, is more of a tourism brand, but really has been provocative and creates great curiosity, sort of a cousin to the Keep Austin Weird. You've heard of that branding. But North of Normal has been very successful for Fargo, and they're owning their coldness and their quirkiness, and it's working really well. So that's a great example of staying true to who you are. And you have our pledge that we're not trying to change what this community is about. We're trying to capture what it's about and make sure others understand that. And then in Frankfort, Kentucky, the smallest state capital in proportion in the country, tiny little town, but just so happens it captures everything that the state of Kentucky is about, but in small portion. And so Kentucky Distilled became their idea. It's funny, we've heard a lot of people say, in terms of Monadnock, that you're a bit of everything New Hampshire has to offer in a smaller package. Would you all agree? There's a little bit, except the coast, right? So that's an interesting parallel that reminded us of the Frankfurt case. So we're pleased with the results and metrics that we've created for communities around the country. You know, every community has to decide what its objectives are. So, and then we measure from there. We've talked to your leadership about that. But, you know, I think that, as I mentioned earlier, the greatest success we can see is endorsement by action. So you're going to know you've succeeded, yes, because we have some residential growth, we have some companies moving in, we have higher tourism. But where you're going to really know you've succeeded with this brand is when your people put it to work each day. So in Dayton, Ohio, Marion's Pizza said, we're proud of what you've told us about ourselves. Dayton patented it's a manufacturing type of community. So they've placed it on their pizza boxes. Back to Providence, this is the brand in action, the creative capital. You know, public trash cans can be as boring as they get. And they said, you know, let's apply our creativity to our trash cans. And so they had a contest in each neighborhood for the most creative expression of a trash receptacle. And so that's the brand at work. And then in Greene County, they put a badge on all their exports. So the cheesemakers put that Greene County sticker on the products that they export. And in Gainesville, Florida, all the key stakeholders came together and signed a brand charter. And so we're all going to live by this and live into this thing. There's no selectivity. We're all in. And so that was a great expression of what they're about. I'm going to wrap up with just a quick demonstration of how we moved from the brand DNA to the brand identity. So we're going to go out to California, to Kern County. Let me give you a geography there. So Kern is north of Los Angeles County, home of Los Angeles, of course. And it's sort of the county where Los Angeles transitions to the Central Valley, you know, which is a huge agricultural area for the nation and really the world. It's the home of Bakersfield, California, you know, that city. It's a little smog up that way because it floats over from LA, but mostly it's been sort of forgotten in the shadow of Los Angeles. And they needed to do some work on diversifying their economy. Historically, an oil and ag industry, those industries are threatened, and there's a lot of competition. There's water concerns. And then on the east side of Kern County is aerospace. So really two completely divergent sort of economic points of origin for this community: agriculture and aerospace. You might know Edwards Air Force Base, Mojave Space Port. Some of those places you hear about on the news are in this county, but no one ever knows it's Kern County. So that gives you a little backdrop. But they knew in competition in aerospace all around the country, and reductions in some of the spending for the space program. All of those things meant they had to rethink and put their best foot forward in terms of defining who they are. So this is their DNA statement. I know it won't mean much to you because you don't know Kern County, but I wanted to show you how we moved from this DNA concept to creative and brand. For those seeking a place made of the right stuff, Kern County, at the intersection of Los Angeles and the Central Valley, is where California is both grounded and boundless, literally and figuratively, giving more power to you. So grounded and boundless became the core idea there because it was a sort of agrarian economy, and there's a great outdoor lifestyle story, but also boundless was a suggestion of, you know, you can do anything here, and the aerospace industry has sort of proven it. And so they're branding Kern County grounded and boundless. And a different situation there, but just a quick demonstration, because this was a regional effort. Bakersfield came in on this, city of Bakersfield, the county, of course, the Economic Development Corporation, and they've been very successful off the ground. We just met with them out at the California League of Cities and talked about this. So that's a quick look at how it all comes together. So that's some backdrop on this process and where it might lead us and why branding can be such an important foundation. I'm going to hand it over to Anita and Roberto, and let's dig into hearing from you about what this region is about. Thanks.
So this is the fun part. As Will mentioned earlier, we're all about learning and listening and hearing from you this week. And so that's what we're going to do now. We're going to talk a little bit about what you think about the region itself. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what you think the brand should be. That doesn't mean we're going to take your order and come back with what you told us. So please don't be disappointed if you say, I think our brand should be a peacock, and we don't give that to you. But we do want to hear what you have to say. For those of you on Zoom, and in the room too, if you'd like, but you're certainly welcome to, well, this will be interactive, we'll talk aloud. For those of you on Zoom in particular, if you'd like to scan this QR code, you'll have a survey that will have all of the questions that we're going to talk about in the room here, and you'll be able to give your answers, and we can take a look at those if we have time at the end. If not, we'll just give them a scan, see if there's anything particularly interesting. And of course, as they mentioned early on, if you have questions or you want to chime in, you're welcome to use that Q&A portion as well. That's just a minute or two.
May I interrupt for just a minute? This is Misty outside. I have a couple of requests to post the link. Is there a way for you guys to do that in the?
Want us taking this survey now or just?
You can, if not, we're going to hear from you, and we can also provide you the link as a follow-up. Generally, with community workshops, we put boards around the room and get up and talk and get in a huddle and group. And so, in the age of COVID, we're going to use some technology to help us along for the folks that can't be here in person. All right. Can I go with it? How many of you guys have been in the region your entire life? 20 years or more? 10 years or more? Less than 5? Okay, good. That's great. We've got a nice mix. Sometimes we come into these community workshops and everybody's brand new. Or sometimes we come in and everybody's been there forever. So it's nice to have a nice mix. Oh, can you email it to them this evening? All right. We'll get that link up for you. I don't think it'll be difficult for you to catch up on the survey. You'll be able to hear us and see it, and then it'll be familiar to you as we go along. So, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about who you are today. So let's start there. So when you think about the region, what's the better descriptor? Spontaneous and high energy, or very careful thinking and planning? When you think about this on a scale of 1 to 5, I don't want to make it too easy for you guys, so I'm not going to start with 3. Who thinks it's a 1? Yeah, I've done this a time or two. I never do this. I'm going to give you a minute to think about it. How about a 5? Okay. 4s? 2s? Right down the middle, number 3. Okay, so we're towards the center of that, maybe a little to the careful thinking planning side, right? Let's look at the next one. In this case, modern, progressive, traditional. This is always an interesting one because communities change a little bit over time, right? And there are some things that are very traditional that are part of your identity and your heritage. And it's not so much about that, but when you think about the region as a whole and who you are today. So obviously, born and raised in Florida, but I spent a couple years up here in New England in Lanesboro, Massachusetts, right out of high school. And the most amazing thing to me was how much history is up here and how old things were. It was just fascinating. But the vibrancy of higher education and the arts and all of the things that were happening up here that I didn't see much back home felt so fresh and new. So think about the region as a whole and your personality. So again, let's start at the polar opposites. Anybody for a 1? I'm gonna guess not. How about a 5? 2. Okay. 4. Right down the middle of 3. All right, I saw 1, 2 in the back. Why? What makes you on that side of modern and progressive? Are there particular things?
I think we have a very long history of tradition, but we're leaning towards being more modern and progressive.
So,
But respecting the tradition, but leaning towards more modern and progressive.
okay, so about aspirations,
Yeah.
where you're headed today. Great.
So is this looking at what we are or what we want to be?
It can be a little bit of both, because aspirations are certainly a little bit about your personality today, right? So it can be a combination of the two. It shouldn't be purely aspirational, nor should your brand, right? Because we all have to have aspirations, but at the end of the day, people have to believe it, and you have to be able to own it and live it. So we can't give you a wildly modern and progressive brand with the rich history that you have here, even if your aspirations are on that side of the scale. So yes, you can think about a little bit of aspiration as long as it's part of, who the community is today, who the region is today. Yes, sir.
I think it's a bit of a challenge for me because I'm somewhat defined by Keene versus the whole region. So I can sort of make an argument both ways in my head. I know this is a regional project,
Sure.
but where you are working or living sometimes defines the region for you.
So does that mean that
Versus the aggregate of all the things.
when you're talking about Keene versus the region, do you put Keene on like maybe one side of the middle and the region on the other, or how
I
does
think
it?
Keene is way more modern and progressive than different town court.
Sure.
Not that it's really bad, it just is.
Yep. Yeah, do you want a job? Because you hit the nail on the head in the challenge of regional branding right there. We have to figure out how do we take all of what's great about Keene's progressiveness and what that adds to the community as a whole, and figure out how to create a brand that really brings all of that together and all of that life. There's a common thread, even if there is a little bit of difference between a major city and the rest of the region. There's a common thread and fabric, and we're going to find it with your help. All right, cutting edge and established. I think this one's probably going to be pretty easy. Let's start with 5. 4. 3. 2. 1. Okay, that was an easy one. How about this? Upscale or accessible to all? This is another one that can be challenging in regions, I think. How about 2s? And 4? 3? Anybody with a 1? Or a 5? Okay, so it's a fairly welcoming place, would you agree? And that, the life here is accessible to most people. So if somebody wants to come here, it's gonna be relatively easy for them to fit in and become a part of this community. Agreed? Is that a reasonable, no? See a couple minutes. Anybody want to share? Maybe not? Yes, ma'am.
I think in this day and age, when we should be recruiting or thinking about all genders, all races, et cetera, we are not as welcoming as we think we are.
Okay, so diversity can be a challenge.
And I agree with that. I think housing, accessibility and being able to make it your housing issues for the others.
Sure, makes perfect sense, and you're not the only ones experiencing that challenge right now, I can tell you that for sure. As Will mentioned, brand can help some of those investments happen. So now let's look at some images. Just a different way to think about the region. So when you see these vehicles, you have something in your mind about the personality of these vehicles. Right? Think about the experience, the brand, the driver. You've got an idea of what's going on here. So if this region was a vehicle,
It's hard to separate the vehicle from the setting, for me.
fair enough. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, like the Red Rocks Jeep, you might say.
Ignore the setting.
Exactly. You need a Subaru Outback.
Subaru Outback or Subaru?
Yeah.
Okay, throw this one away. Subaru Outback. We'll just fill that in for you on Zoom. Subaru Outback.
I think a pickup truck too.
That's,
Yeah.
that's it.
So we need
Number
to
5
lift
is what we.
Yeah, number 5 needs to be lifted. Yeah, the number 5 is like, you know, the bulk of a lot of people's investments.
Sure, okay,
It's the luxury car for the region.
gotcha.
But once again, I think we have to go back to what Ed said. If you live in Keene, your vision of which vehicle is gonna be very different than if you live in one of the outlying towns.
Right. So, are we talking about Keene right now?
See how many people has room on the pickup truck? Or aspire to. I don't drive it as a pickup, I drive it as a nice car.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of applies to the car.
How many Keene residents? A good number. Most of you have activities and interests outside.
What do you mean by?
I don't understand the question.
Hiking, enjoying outdoor activities outside of Keene. I was just gonna encourage you to try to think outside of your Keene residency and think, what are the things that I enjoy outside of Keene? That might help, because I understand the dilemma, right? You're like, I'm a Keene resident, but try to think about some of the things you might do, experience, or enjoy, or participate in that are not in Keene, and then maybe bring it through that lens as much as you can. But Keene is central to this story too, so we welcome your Keene lens to.
You might want to have a bicycle option out
Yeah.
there.
So
That's
Subaru
an
and bicycle.
excellent suggestion.
Can I just remind everyone to really speak up so the folks on Zoom can hear us? And we are getting some comments from them too, so Misty's gonna interrupt with those that she feels like it's the right time.
Great.
Okay.
Yep, and we're getting good.
If I may interrupt, I do have a couple of folks who are asking if they could get some sense of how many individuals are raising their hand for each of those questions in the room.
Sure, yes, I'll be happy to do that.
And Will, I would take your question and reverse it. Those of us who live outside of town, what is our relationship with Keene? And how often do we access Keene or Brattleboro, which goes the other way, or Peterborough, which goes the other way, or up north? I believe that it's very different.
Good, great, that's great stuff for that community survey that we're gonna do. That'll give us some good insights there. Yes.
There's no question there's a diverse set of experiences in the region. Yeah, so thanks.
Just a question or a note, but are any one of those vehicles EV? But I think it's a valid point, because,
It is a valid point.
you know, we've got $80,000 pickup trucks now that are EV.
That's
But
true.
are they in this region? Who knows?
Yeah.
That is number 8, it looks like it could be EV, but
Yes.
Yes, it is.
I kind of feel like the entire bottom row. If
that's an electric vehicle, I assumed it was an electric vehicle.
Yeah.
It kind of, picks up different personalities of the region.
All right. Let's see what else. Again, so just thinking about the personality of these things. So when you see these images, you have a thought and a feeling. How does that relate to the personality of the region? Anybody for number one? We specifically don't customize these per region, so that it's sort of a broad look. Had a feeling that we're going to be at number one, sir. How about number twos? Some head nodding, sitting down hands. Up, one hand, two. How about number three? So we got about 10 for number three. And number four? Another 3 or so. 5, 6, 6. Couple 6s, sort of maybe 6s. 7s. 8s. None of that. So number 3, we have a bunch of those. Anybody want to comment? Is it the land, the setting? Is it because it's rural? Because it feels like here?
It's outside.
Yes.
It's like the road going to Walrus.
In any direction, okay.
I have a couple of folks who'd like to weigh in. Is now an okay time?
Yep.
Okay, we have one person who said that they didn't think that any of them were very representative. Peterborough, sorry. N8 kind of looks like Keene if you look past the lights in the background. We have an N3. It's very difficult to pick one image that represents the town and the city. One of the beautiful things about our region is the unique personality and character of each town.
All right. So, if the region was a person, which one of these stereotypical personalities would it be? So when you look at these, so best friend, somebody you can talk to about anything, you can always count on, they're always there for you, creative. This is the person that always has the great ideas, who loves to do art. We think about that, somebody who's really engaged in science and so excited about it, and an innovator in their own right, but maybe not considered creative even though they should be. Teacher helper, again, this is somebody who really helps you along and who has the knowledge to get you there. Entertainer, I think that's pretty obvious. Loves to put on a show and it's very engaging. Hero, this is kind of related to teacher helper, but heroes are more just go for it, right? Not so much about helping you find your way. And explorer, pioneer, so charting the courses, paving the way, and of course, expert is highly intellectual, yes.
When I think of this region, I think of all 8 of those people are in there.
All of them?
Yeah, absolutely. I look at around the room and I see all of those people stay in here and probably on Zoom and think about what we do. Oftentimes we say, no, that can't be done, and we do it. Our arts community and we have amazing, we have 3 higher education systems right here, and
Yeah.
we're in one. And we just have experts in our field and leading various things around the country. So all 8 of those are representative of our region.
I actually thought the same with the last couple of slides, that there was most of them that.
Great, good. I mean, that's a bountiful problem to have, right? It's a challenge for us, and again, it's a challenge for regional branding because you do have these broad. If I made you pick one though, that simplifies the region. Anybody for number 1? All right, we got 3 number ones, number 2. No 2s, number 3. Number 4. And we got 6 or 7 of those. Number 5. Number 6. Number 7. 4 or 5 of those, and number 8. All right. The next one. And I'm sure somebody in the room is gonna say it should be, because they always do, and I know you guys still got some people already in mind.
Yeah, get LeBron off of there.
Bad representation.
Anybody got one? None? I hear a couple nods in the room, so. How about number 1? Morgan Freeman. Number 2? Yeah, I knew we were gonna get a couple of those, so 4, 5. Number 3? Who was number 2? He's from the office.
Parks and Recreation.
Can't remember his actual name.
Big off.
Make off.
I should know that, right? I never watched it, no.
It's actually a good one, because on the side, he's like very experienced and skilled carpenter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to use part.
Never watched it.
Number 3? 4?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Got one of those. 5 and 6.
I just have a comment. I think, I know that this is an exercise, but this region doesn't have anything to do with celebrity.
Sure.
You know, so
Yeah.
that for me is why this sort of
Feels like a disconnect.
doesn't
Sure, yeah.
disconnect, right?
Yeah, this can be a little esoteric.
Right. No, I'm not being critical.
If it did,
I
though,
think
if
that's
it
part of our.
did Jamie, it'd be like Ken Burns,
Ken
who
Burns?
is a reluctant celebrity.
Yes.
Right.
There you go. That's actually an excellent one. Good point.
I would just say now that I know that number 2 is Nick Offerman, that I would pick number 2,
Yeah.
knowing what I know about Nick Offerman now.
Yeah.
Right.
Um,
Okay. This one is a really challenging one. Let's talk about esoteric. I often, in fact, remove this one because it can be really challenging, but sometimes we have really good conversations about it. Because people think really interestingly about this. So these materials come with their own set of personality, right? Like, and qualities that you think about when you see them. Granted, you can't build a house out of every single one of these necessarily, but they have different sort of uses. I see some people nodding, so I think you're gonna get it, but, so, which one of these images best represents the personality of the region? Number 1. Got 1. Number 2. Lots of 2s. Got 8 or so. Number 3. 4.
What is that, Berber carpet?
Perfect.
What
What'd you think it was?
I thought it was granite. I thought it was a granite on top.
Okay.
Oh.
5. Got 3 of those, and 6.
You've got somebody.
There's a question up on the board.
Somebody's raising their hand.
That may have been a vote.
It may have been. We've actually tried to do that before, it's just too much, because too many people raising their hands at one time. Okay, so now we're gonna talk a little more directly. What is iconic? What is the one thing? So if I was sitting next to you on a plane, you told me where you were from, and you wanted to show me what this region is, what's the one picture you pull up on your phone and show me?
Clearly.
The mountain? Is there anything else? Covered bridges?
I have a comment also. I think it's interesting. I think the mountain is a clear iconic visual thing. I do think, and I don't know how you reacted the first time you saw the RFP for this project. I heard you pronounce it wrong. I think people have trouble saying it, and I think you could use that as a positive.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that strikes me is it was brought up early on about how when people actually get here, they're like, wow, this place, there isn't a problem with place or product. This place, I didn't even know about it. It's really a great place. I could see raising a family here. I could see taking a relaxing vacation here. It's kind of easy to love. I think it's hard to say and easy to love.
Yes. I think that's an excellent point.
If I may interrupt, we have a lot of folks online that are feeling that there's really not one answer or one way to identify the Monadnock region. One individual is asking, are we asking folks to stay here, to move here through this process, or are we asking folks to come visit, go home? And then another individual says, an honest question for the speakers. We keep coming back to this theme that we need to find the thing that represents the whole region. But we are 40 towns with radically different economics, demographics, and objectives. And then, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, there's
Sorry.
just, that kind of seems to be a lot of the field. The Monadnock region, unforgettable as it is, unpronounceable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just a tiny bit of housekeeping, folks. If we can just make sure that if we're not at the microphone and speaking, if we would just make sure that we have our masks up and over our nose, that would be very helpful here on campus. Thank you.
So yes, our goal is all of the above. Those that ask that question: do we want people to move here? Do we want people to come visit? Do we want to have a vacation here? Yes, yes, to all of that, which is part of why it's so important to talk about the whole region and really gather those resources and create that momentum, because regionalism works. So Keene can certainly market themselves as a city, and there's value in doing that. But when a region is working together, particularly with limited resources, everything is amplified and everything is magnified. And so your results are exponentially better when regionalism is working at its best. And yes, to the hard to say, we had a little bit of discussion. I don't know if you guys can hear that well on Zoom, but it can be a challenge. And to your point, that may be something to use to get people's attention. This is always hard. One word.
Can I just make a comment on the last?
Yes, yeah.
Sort of piggybacks what Jeff was saying a little bit, but like it always strikes me when you are flying back into this region, and you fly over to the Monadnock region, and then you fly over Nashua and into Manchester, and there's this disparity in terms of it's we're iconic almost because we're not the southeastern part of the state.
Sure.
And I don't know how you guys do with that, but it always strikes me as very interesting because it's we're rural, but there's pockets of suburbs and cities, but we're not the other southern.
Sure. Yeah. And there are a lot of places in the country that are in that sort of position, like we're the not them. So it's certainly valuable, but you have to be very cautious about creating a brand around it, because everybody's evolving, right? And things start changing, and then that becomes less relevant potentially. But the idea is highlighting those things that are the not, that make you feel so unique. So Will's giving you an index card. We always like to collect these words for later. I'd love to hear some of your ideas and talk about some of these words, but if you would write down one word that describes the Monadnock. Monadnock, did I get it right? All right. Region. We'll collect those at the end. And anybody want to share one? Yes, ma'am. Cheers. Cheers.
I've been here all my life except for 14 years. I left and came back 3 times. And the reason I did is, I didn't see it on here, I never found a sense of community. And it's nice to come back to a place where everybody knows your name, not everyone. But you can walk down the street and run into somebody you know at any given time.
Sure. Okay.
Engaged.
Engaged. That's a good one. And that's been my experience so far, so that's. Anybody else have one they want to share?
We're the quiet, so we've always kind of been the quiet corner. There's no real bells and whistles. This is where you come together and all, with each other.
Sure.
We're a bucolic.
Sure, yeah. What's that? I like it. What colors do you most associate with the region?
Depends on the season.
I know, right? Anybody for blue? You can pick a few. You don't have to pick one. Brown? Y'all have one season out there. Do you call it one season out there, or is that just in Massachusetts?
Yeah.
Okay. Gray? Green? Yeah, almost everybody for green. Orange? Yep. 6 or 7 orange.
Orange is Keene High's color, so
Sure. Purple? Handful of purples, reds? Same. Yellow? Okay, so vibrant nature. I'm gonna skip this one because I want to get on to what the region's brand should be.
See, I had a question about that one.
Oh,
Who do you think is our competitor? Who are we competing against? And that almost gets to who do we target? Are we targeting people in California to come here? Are we targeting people in Boston? Where are we? Therefore, who are we competing against?
With the current state of affairs, you're likely going to want to work out regionally. It's a lot easier to convince somebody to move from Boston and get out of the city and come get this life and pick up their family, and particularly if they've been here a long time and they've got family here, than it is to convince somebody to move, say from California, Sacramento. That's a long way, particularly if you're leaving family behind. So the most likely strategy, and we haven't developed all of those plans yet, is sort of a broadening of your target base. Now, are there some individual places that it might make sense to target further from that? Sure. But in a general sense, that would be the case.
The process is to determine what is most appealing and what is most distinct. And then that helps us know who values that, and then we go find out where they are. Typically, we have found that relocations happen within, about a 2 to 5 hour radius. Now, you are going to get the remote workers, right, from California that can now work anywhere. But we need folks on the ground that can work at your local companies. An early hunch is that'll be within a 2 to 5 hour radius. But more to come on a very good question. We haven't set the exact target yet, it seems.
I can speak to the travel industry, as can other people here. The competition is all the other New Hampshire regions, the Berkshires and Vermont. We're surrounded by them.
Yes, sir.
I'd be really interested to see of what the migration did. We have real estate folks on board that can survey a lot of the people who just moved here. At a recent issue last night at our council, 5 people spoke up in favor of the proposed dog park. 3 of them had just moved from outside of this New England region, New Jersey, California, and Ohio. And that kind of baffles me a little bit, but it also says, people are moving here for a reason, and what is that reason?
Yep.
And I'd be really curious to find out if we were able to get any of that data from real estate folks.
I would also add to that understanding, the age of the person that's moving here. A lot of the people who are moving from really far away tend to be a lot older. They're not coming here to work, they're retiring here.
Sure.
So
These are all
age becomes a big factor.
These are all young families.
Super.
Yeah.
Comments, that pertain to maybe this. I have a comment that the area provides diverse shopping, recreational dining, entertainment, lakes, proximity to ski, proximity to bigger cities, Boston and the ocean. There are 20 or more retirees from New York City and other major metro departments that have retired to our region. That's coming from the fire service network. Sorry, I just have to scroll. Our visitors are from New York City, Northern Mass, Boston Metro. People who move here are often from New Jersey as well. Our workforce, I do have somebody that's saying that they're having a hard time hearing folks speak. If we could start passing around that mic.
Sure.
And then we have a good diversity of age groups testifying to City Council last night, including those who recently moved here.
Yeah, she was just, it sounds like somebody was also at that same council meeting and was noting the younger folks that had just moved here. Okay, so let's move on and talk about the brand, and we can go through these pretty quickly because they're pretty straightforward questions. So, should your brand be bold or subtle? How many for a 1? How about a 5? 2? Almost the whole room for 2. Okay, we'd love to see that as creative. Like a bold brand. Any 3s? Couple 3s, 4s? I think I already know this based on our color question. Red or muted? Number 1s? 2, 4 reds. Number 2s? Yeah. 6 or 7. Number 3s? And full of right down the middle. Anybody for a 4 or 5? All right, so we want a bright brand. Simple or complex? This one can be a challenge. So simple can be a challenge for a region, but complexity can be a challenge for a brand. So when you think about a simple brand, Nike spent billions of dollars on the brand, is for example, right? Complexity, I think of county seals and state seals when I think about a complex brand. Visually speaking. So, how many 3s? Couple 3s. How many 2s? Yeah, almost the whole room for 2. How about 4s? Couple 4s. Anybody for a 1 or a 5? All right, where you landed?
1.
1. Okay, keep it simple. 1, couple 1s. Okay.
Hey, a quick reminder, if you haven't written your 1 word down, I know we've moved on to other topics, we're gonna collect those from.
Should the region's brand be progressive or traditional? How many for 1s? 1. How many for 5s? Okay, so we're sliding the scale this way a little. How about 2s? 3 or 4 twos. How about 4s? 3 4s and 3. 7 or 8 in the middle there. Okay. So we've got a scale that leans a little more progressive, which. Now, should your brand be edgy or safe? It's a little different than progressive and traditional, right? There's arguments for both. So how many 401? How about a 5? 1 for the 5. How many for 2s? 7. How many for 4s? 6 or 7 and 3s. 4 or 5. Okay, so now you guys know why I told you we're not taking a order or a prescription here today, right? Because there's always some range, and that's why this process is so important. So finding that DNA leads us to sort of how to slide these scales around to create the best brand for the region. And finally, give us your warning shot. So if you guys come back with what? I will be really disappointed. I don't want to see any what in our brain. Is there anything? Yes, sir.
A new name for the region.
A new name for the region. Okay.
Something too slick.
Too slick.
A brand that feels too slick.
Granite feels too slick. Okay.
LeBron.
Got it.
A deer.
A deer.
Good.
Promise.
Really good point.
Phony.
Phony. Okay.
A church steeple.
A church steeple. Yeah. Yes, sir. The mountain. Interesting. Anybody else in the room? By show of hands, I hope the mountain's not in our brand.
I hope it is.
That was gonna be my next question. Who thinks, man, we can't have a brand without the mountain?
Just think it's iconic.
Yeah. Handful, okay.
But it can't stand alone.
Can't stand alone. Okay, yep, good point.
I have one from our cyber friends. We have, I'd be really disappointed if it ended up being all about Keene.
Yep. All right, I want to thank you all, both here in person and on Zoom. Did you want to?
I have a question.
Yes, I was, yes.
So as I look around the room and know that this is the Greater Keene and Peterborough Chambers, are you visiting Peterborough separately? Because it feels a little off in terms of representation. I feel like if we're talking about the region, we're missing a portion of the region.
Yeah, can I address that?
Yes, you absolutely can.
Probably, I think Will did a great job in terms of talking about their process in general, but we probably should have aired out a little more about what's been happening this week. So they've actually had an additional colleague, so there have been 4 people from North Star here since Monday, and they have been physically touring the region. So they started off going to Gilsum, to WS Badger, then they went to Walpole, they went to Winchester, they went to Ringe, they went to Peterborough, went to they've been in Hancock. By the time they left here, independent of this meeting, they will have met personally with 75 people in the region. So just yesterday, just for my part of the tour, I started off with Roberto and Franklin Pierce, meeting Kim Mooney, the Franklin Pierce president. At the same time, Patrick went to Rivermead. This is Peterborough Day, right? We had a tour down, oh, I'm so sorry. We had a tour downtown of Peterborough. We had lunch at People's United Bank with Bill Littles from Steeles. They saw the library in Peterborough. Then Roberto and I went and saw Cindy McGuire, the CEO of the hospital in Peterborough. Meanwhile, Patrick went and saw Bob Wilkins at So Clean. Roberto and I went back downtown to visit Cy Gregg of Depot Square. Then we went out to the Harris Center and met with Jeremy Wilson and Ryan Owens of the Monadnock Conservancy. So these days are packed, and that's just sort of one of the representatives of what they did yesterday. And this meeting is, it's not intended to be conclusive in any way. I hope you understand. This is just more input, and we're going to continue to collect input from all kinds of residents. We have a website that's about this whole process called brandingmonadnock.com. I say we, but North Star built that. And anyone in the region can go to that site, put in their name and their email address, and we will continue to solicit information from them. I believe the idea for the survey is to have that early December or something like that. So by December, we'll be able to kind of say to the whole public community, this is a way that anyone can provide input, even a visitor, into the branding process. So it's really been quite a project to put this site visit together. And I do want to introduce Julie Chazelle, who's our project manager. Julie, come up close to the camera so everyone can see you. Why don't you even say a few words about what it's like to put this together?
Hi, everyone. So my name is Julie, and I am sort of a recent transplant. I moved here from New York in 2017. And so putting this together was, especially after basically 2 years at home with 2 small children, was really informative. I really learned so much about the area that I don't think I would have learned otherwise. And you know, putting it together, like Jamie said, we were really dedicated to involving as much of the region as we could. I mean, there are things to consider like time and driving, so we have to be somewhat reasonable with that. But you know, we really focused on including sort of the more metropolitan areas like Keene, and then farms and other, you know, like manufacturing places, to get a full understanding of what goes on here. And putting the project together, I mean, Jamie mentioned 75 people. They represent all kinds of things. We have people doing creative arts. We have people who are running companies, large companies, small companies, CNS, you know, and then down to 2-person consulting firms. So we're doing our best to make sure it's all here. And then we'll be taking the next 10 months or so developing that. So it's not going to be rushed. You know, your thoughts are incredibly important as we continue. And I will be here, and Luke is here, and Jamie's here, and we'll all be working together to make sure it's a fair representation.
You got it.
Okay.
And Jamie, I'll add it, at the website here, you can also sign up to be a brand ambassador. That's going to be critical when we move into the implementation phase to, you know, get a core of leaders that want to get behind making the brand real. Jarvis.
So I don't know what our participation was like as it compares to other communities where you've done this before, but I just want to say thank you. If this feels like dental surgery going through that process, I don't know, hurting cats the way you did through that process, that's got to be hard. And thanks for doing it. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it was great input. This is a great group. Clearly, you know, you represent some of those passionate people that Bill talked about in the beginning that are so critical to branding. And we're excited to be here. We're excited about the region. I would reiterate, please reach everybody you can with this website and with the survey when it comes out. That's so important, to the point that was made, to get this to as many people in the community as possible, because not everybody can come sit in a focus group or come to a one-on-one interview or come to a community workshop. But their voice is really important, and they're a big part of making this brand and this project and this region grow and be successful. So please, we appreciate your help with that, enthusiasm for it, and
And it's really important to us, so thank you.
Jamie, can we ask Misty if there's any of our Zoom participants that feel unanswered on anything? Because that's hard for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing. I want to open up for questions, but I do want to address one of the questions one of the Zoom participants mentioned, and Sue, you too, which is each of these communities is unique. There's no intention here to sort of whitewash this region with one kind of, I don't know, I'm mixing metaphors, but to cover it with one blanket that erases the unique character of the region. And in so many of the interviews I sat in yesterday, that was something that people kept saying, but not as an objection to a branding effort, but rather as a strength of the region. That it's one of the appeals that we have here, is that each of these communities is unique and has so much. But the challenge for this team and for all of us is to find out what it is in common that we have, that we can lead with as we try to distinguish ourselves and make ourselves better known. So I just wanted to make sure that nobody felt like we were just trying to erase these differences or ignore them. So, Misty, do you have any folks who want to come on and ask a question? I know you can put them on so we can hear their audio. And
I can actually do that. I'm going to wait just a minute. I haven't had anyone that has asked to speak. I had some folks I thought might want to. Basically, I have let everyone know that if they did submit a question or a comment and we just weren't able to read it in the moment, I will be sending all of these questions to your team. So you will have opportunity to see all of the questions that have been posed or the comments. It's like Keene in the region, the Monadnock region, it's very eclectic in some of the comments and really falls on a continuum. We do have, Hannah Grimes says it would be great to have more of these tests, but with more and more narrow choices so we can come as close as possible to the desirable branding image. And then there is the question that keeps surfacing. What is the purpose of doing this? Is it for visitation or relocation to the area or both?
Yeah, let me come back to that. So when we started this project, we identified 4 areas where we felt there would be value in attracting folks. And tourism is an obvious one, but what came immediately to the surface when we were talking about this was about the importance of attracting more workers to the region and young families to the region and higher ed students. And that's, if we were trying to do all 4 of those things, that would be a really ambitious goal. And we don't have a huge budget. Our vision here, our budget can be as big as we want it to make it from a fundraising standpoint. But our vision here is that once we start marketing, it's really not even worth bothering with an effort like this unless we can raise at least $200,000 a year to spend on marketing. And even then, that's not going to open any floodgates. So we're going to have to be targeted. Jeff asked the question, how are we going to target? One of the things we'll have to decide on is our focus even among those 4 categories. Is it most important that we attract workers here most immediately because of the needs of our businesses and their importance to our economy? Some of these businesses, some of these manufacturing businesses are saying they might not stay here. So our inability to attract the 50 people they need to work here puts at risk the 400 people that are working here. We're going to have to prioritize like that, and we're going to have to prioritize geographically because we just won't be able to send a scattershot message that has any kind of impact. So the answer is all those goals are on our list, but the prioritization is yet to happen. And a lot of that will come out of the recommendations that we get from North Star based on all the interviews that they're having with all of us.
There are a couple of comments online here that basically they know that if the brand is created correctly, it's going to work to bring those who choose to be or come here. This work is being supported by the Keene and Peterborough Chamber of Commerce. The fact that you are hosting citizen engagement in Keene, but only taking to retirement home residents and large employees in Peterborough makes me question how well our town is getting represented and therefore how legitimate the exercise is. But overall, folks feel like if we do the process will work.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like that person came from Peterborough. I live in Peterborough, so I'm super sensitive to the Keene Peterborough thing, which, by the way, is historically been, you know, like I work at Yankee, right on the great divide between Peterborough and Keene. And I know people in both communities, and they aren't as different as you might think. As for talking to big businesses, I would not describe Bill Little's of Steel as a big business. We went into Bowerbird. We went into the coffee shop in Peterborough. Those are not big businesses. Yes, we talked to Soapling. Yes, we went over to Wrigley. But I think the North Star people are getting a real three-dimensional picture of what we have here. Any questions or comments from the folks in attendance? Terry?
Yeah, so I understand the point of this. I think it's logical, sure. To what degree will this be helpful in terms of retention?
You know, I think that's a great question, and I'd like to have the North Star people answer it because they put a lot of emphasis on in their proposal to us on the importance of the adoption of this brand and the excitement about it from local folks. Do you want to just talk about that from your prior experience? Come over to the mic.
Retention is critical, and the exercise must be focused there. We always say that the first audience for the brand has to be the community itself. So this seems like we're trying to just talk to people from afar, right? So those visitors, those potential employees, those potential companies, and we are. But the first level of endorsement and acceptance has to be locally. And what we hope will happen then in regard to retention is that it's a reminder to folks of, yeah, we are that, and that's pretty good. And because sometimes communities, we don't sense that this region suffers from low self-esteem. We do see that in some communities, and the brand is helpful in sort of lifting their view of themselves and reminding them why they love this place. So we think that the brand will and have to do that, and then ultimately that, Terry, leads to the retention goal as well. Because right, we don't want to fill a leaking bucket. We have to retain and then attract. So always the first order of business is connecting with the residents. Hope that answers it. Anything else?
Yes, I actually have a couple questions. So we're starting here today with, or not starting here, but we've spoke to businesses to start this process. At what point are we going to be speaking to citizens? What point will we be getting other towns involved in research? At what point will we be visiting places like the Dublin General Store or the Buddhist temple or any of those types of spaces and speaking with the citizens?
Yeah. Well, we have visited, as Jamie pointed out, all the local haunts that you could think of. So we've done a good job of that. We'll continue to do that. We'll be back. The principal way that we hear from a large number of residents is our community survey. And that will be broadcast in all the municipal social channels and the chamber. And we're going to spread the word, a guerrilla marketing campaign to get as many residents from every corner of the region to participate in that survey. Along the way, however, to answer that question specifically, I'm gonna do some of this today and tomorrow. We do what we call intercepts on the streets. And we just talk to people as we encounter them. And so that's a process. However, we found we need to get a quantitative method to really be sure that we're hearing the voice. So we have to do a survey, and we hope to get hundreds and low thousands of responses to that. So thanks in advance for promoting that survey and asking your friends and family and colleagues to take it and let their voices be heard. So, any others, Misty?
Well, looks like we're ready to wrap up. Thank you.
Hey, thank you all Zoom participants. We know this wasn't easy, but we're so glad you were part of this. It's important. And we thank all of you for coming down. And we're just getting started. These were, some of the questions felt abstract and strange, but they were very helpful to us. So you helped us. We're further along than where we were when we began. So we appreciate it.